What up? Enjoy the hostilities, my friends. Enjoy the hostilities number 16. Look at that. In 2 years, we've only done 16 podcasts. That's actually not true. We've done hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content about martial arts, about life, about how martial arts informs life. Over time, this podcast has taken on many shapes. It's just my thoughts influenced by Mark and the people that send us questions and the people that give us feedback. And it's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. We're going to do, maybe we'll do one on Sunday, but we'll definitely try to do, we will definitely do another one next week, and we'll get back in the swing of things better. Mark's also chopping things up, so we've got a few other pieces to share. But, man, it's really cool to have people care about the shit that you do and give you feedback. It might look different if you're listening on iTunes or SoundCloud, or I don't know how the fuck people listen to podcasts now. Mark, where do they listen to podcasts? Yeah, and some other shit. Then you don't see it, but we're in a different setup. Where we're normally set up, I think we're going to redesign it with the television and do some breakdowns, but that's coming in the coming weeks. We've been playing around with it. Speaking of which, very quickly, if I try not to ask for things. I try to we try to give it as honestly as we can. Make shit, give it to people. Ask for very little. Have zero expectations. That's the best way to make things. It's the most honest way you'll make things. It'll allow you to make the best art you're going to make. And that's what we try to do as best we can. I try not to ask for anything, but I'm asking you for this. On my Instagram page, there is a link. It takes you to my Wonder Boy versus Anthony Pettis breakdown. The link is in the bio, and that's on ESPN's YouTube channel, which is really cool for me. If you would watch that and share it, that would be killer. All right, what are we going to talk about this week? This podcast has shaped from talking about fights and matchups in a sporting contest to allowing the viewing and studying of martial arts to inform life. I suspect over time it's going to mutate even more in that direction. We're hoping to go to Rochester, New York. What is it? May 18th, something like that. May 18th. And there we got Kevin Lee versus Rafael dos Anjos and a bunch of other good fights. I think the next time we sit down with people, we're going to talk about life, about learning, about studying, about growing, about fears, about anxiety, about society. That's just over time where it's gone. Yes, all of it for us takes place within the world of martial arts, or much of it. Or it's informed by it, or it's shaped by it. But I suspect if you are some of those people who are like, this guy rarely ever talks about the matchups, you'll probably just leave. And I'm sorry, but nothing appeals to everyone. And while I'm throwing out advice about how to make the most honest work you can make, because that means a lot to me, if you ever are trying to appeal to everyone, you're going to make very average garbage. Because it's impossible. We're all different. We all love different things. We all have different feelings, movement. And these days, and we're going to do an Ask Robin Black today. We got some questions. These days, how you see the world, your personal worldview and your philosophy on life and stuff filters everything. Mark and I were just having a topic. Mark is not white. Sri Lankan?
Yep.
Yeah, Mark is Sri Lankan. And we were just talking about how in the world today, that there are people who you can see who might just be slightly and we're in Canada, bear in mind, who might be uncomfortable talking to somebody, a white person, say, and there's an Asian. When I was in Seoul, South Korea, South Koreans, there was a lot of racism to Japanese people. There was a lot. Now you can sometimes trace some of these things. Japan had occupied Seoul and South Korea only 2 generations earlier. But these things are shaped by the world that we live in. So whether you're talking about Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal, or you're talking about CNN versus Fox, or you're talking about any of these things, we've carved sides and we defend them to the death. And some people love something, they hate another thing. And you see it every day. People are arguing about something and they're both sure the other one's an idiot. And they both feel the same way. And they're both certain of it. And they're both right. In most cases. In most cases, if you're looking at somebody and you're like, how the fuck can he think this? And he's looking at you, you're both dumb. You're both probably dumb. At least you're both limiting yourself and how you think. Anyways, this kind of shit we talk about, this is and it'll change over time, but we're going to flow with the world, you know? If we're going to talk to, you know, who are some of the coaches in Rochester? Who's
Dewey Cooper will be there.
Yeah.
Jason Perillo.
Let's say we're going to talk to Jason Perillo. Jason, if you happen to catch this, and I know some of your friends watch it, we'll want to talk to you about how your family is. We'll want to talk to you about how the things that martial arts have taught you about seeing the world. That's what we're going to want to talk about. Anyways, so that is going to happen more. So over time, you'll end up with the audience that you deserve. And if that audience is small but committed, that's the audience. We'll make 1 minute breakdown videos on Instagram, and we're going to try to make 3 and 4 minute videos and embed them in here. Analysis videos, breakdown stuff. So we can do some of that because that's a passion. That's a deep passion. You'll see 400 of those on Instagram or 600 of those on Instagram. So you know it's a passion. So today, let's talk a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Darren Till and Jorge. And yes, of course, we're going to talk about the fight. We're going to talk about their lives. We're going to talk about their continued careers as fighters. And you know, if thoughts on that. You know, how their lives change. That's an interesting one for me these days. Not just, you know, who might you fight next, although that's a big part of their lives. Big part of any of these fighters' life is who's the next guy on the contract. Who am I preparing to fight now? For a lot of reasons. But outside of that, your life changes. The trajectory of your business, your career changes. And that's okay. That's part of life. We'll talk about that. We'll also hit on, we got some Ask Robin Black, some cool questions. Bruce Lee, TJ Dillashaw. We got questions about how a Kung Fu monk, Shaolin Kung Fu trained monk would do in MMA. We got some neat stuff, and then we will talk about the lightweight division. And so we got Poirier versus Holloway coming up soon. We also got Gaethje versus Barbosa even sooner. I think that's like a week before, and we've got Cowboy and Ally Aquinta coming up to Canada. So we'll talk about that. But first, let's take a look at some thoughts that we gathered and some thoughts that we have around Jorge versus Darren Till. Jorge Masvidal versus Darren Till after the hostilities. I did one of these in my kitchen the same day as those fights, and I was stoked because great fight. Really cool martial arts, really cool contest, really cool dynamic between two great fighters. And I love Darren Till. I'm a huge fan, and I'm going to be. I've never met him, but I'm going to be a fan for as long as that man fights, and longer if we still live in a world where you get to watch them on Instagram and in their own platform seeing their thing. I'm going to be a fan of that guy for a long time. But Jorge is my man. That's my guy right there. And I wouldn't be mad at Darren if he defeated him. I'd be thrilled for him. Because you know you defeated a really fucking good fighter right there. So, but yes, the added thrill, you'll see it right on this YouTube channel, or if you're listening to this podcast, you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/RobinBlack. We went out for a brunch with Jorge after he lost to Damian Maia. Wonderful afternoon. There was some of the great, hey Mark, one of the best days we've had. Yeah. Professionally, and plus you're around brilliant people like this, you learn shit just being there.
It was so surreal too, especially because that was after a loss. I mean, it would have been really easy to hang out and talk with us the next day after a win and all that, but he was still processing the fight, going through that with us. It was great.
Yeah, and he said right up, are we still cool to do it? Fuck yeah, of course. I told you, and he was saying that weekend, because he was that was one of the circling back around where people are like going, hey, we're paying attention to this guy, because they come in cycles, and he's in a big one right now, and they rise and fall, and he knows that. All the best know that. But as people were asking for shit, he's like, nah, you know what? I'm going to just spend my time with people that have been with me from the start. I'm one of them. You go on... you look up my name and his name, you'll see a breakdown I did of him in backyards, So I've been studying this special martial artist for a long time. But yeah, so he loses it. He's like, hey, we're still going. We had brunch. We ate Mexican food, We didn't have any weed for him in Canada. No problems. You would get it at the store. But in Dallas,
Dallas is a little tricky to find. I remember.
Yeah, a little trickier. Yeah.
A little tricky.
So the fight itself, let's look at different aspects of it. I know that this is a week ago now, and you could be watching this in fucking 2030. If so, it was 11 years ago. But nonetheless, these fights are brilliant moments in time. They're like live performances. My wife is a singer. And her and her friends, she works mostly in musical theater. She's in New York right now auditioning for a Broadway musical. Pretty Woman. And I was like, oh, yeah, I think you're the prettiest. And she's like, I'm auditioning for the best friend. So, well, yeah, there's a role for everybody, right? My wife's amazing. So her and her friends will sit around and they'll watch like fucking, what's that French chick that was like the greatest singer ever? Shaolin. They'll sit around and they'll watch Celine Dion sing one fucking night where of all the shit she ever sung, she just murders it. Just some fucking transcendent performance, right? And they sit there and they're like, yeah, back in 2011, this was that night where she fucking slayed it. Because that's what it is to perform. That's what these fights are. These fights, we do it a disservice. It's nobody's fault. It's part of the momentum of the hot take narrative world that we live in. Only matters is the outcome, and then on to the next thing. That's not the case. These are brilliant moments that happen, and they're just as meaningful. In fact, sometimes far more meaningful years later. I'm trying to think of something I just broke down the other day from years back, and I was learning so many new things from it because now you view it through the lens of all of your life experience and all of your knowledge. So, fight's a week old. All kinds of brilliance in it to see, but a lot of neat stuff. And I did talk about it in the other after the hostilities. But when we talk about expertise and veteran and experience. That's the word I was stumbling around looking for. What is that actually? Well, this is a fight where you saw that. It's a fight where Darren hadn't ever been read to the degree he was started to be read early in round 2. Drops Jorge. Jorge kicked him in the nuts first, right off the bat. Don't think that's not at least some slim chance that was intentional. I'm not saying it was. In fact, it probably wasn't. But don't think that sometimes you see that it isn't, because they're humans. They're humans with weird strategies that sometimes break outside the rule. Again, I don't think that's the case here. But and then he gets dropped, and then he's beating him up. Wins round 1. Darren Till's fucking killing it. Young, long, really uses his particular collection of tools really well. It's great. Round 2, Jorge starts to figure out, and the reason I go to a few layers deep is I could easily just say, he started to figure out his rhythm. Now he got the timing. Once he had the timing, he was able to switch stances and hit him with the overhand left. That's all true. In this case, sometimes we say things that are not true, but that's all true in this case. But my first question is, what do you mean figured out his rhythm? And in rhythms, and I think I brought this analogy the other day. If Mark and I decide, you want to go, you got time for food after? Maybe not. We're not sure yet. We got a lot of other stuff to do. I got all this video I got to get off Mark that I'm doing for Bellator. I'm breaking down a bunch of Bellator videos for DAZN. Anyways, so if we decided we were going to walk to Parkdale, it's about 10-minute walk for tacos. Within a minute, 2 minutes, as we talked and we weren't thinking about it, we would fall into the same footsteps, right? Yeah, everybody's had that experience. If you haven't, go for a walk with your friend, start talking. Pretty soon, fall in the same footsteps. Yeah, get 3 of your friends. That will happen, right? Now, the large extension of that is when you see in Japan, or I think it might be China actually. It's celebrated in the Middle East, or in the Far East a fair bit in Asia. But they'll get these people and they'll walk and they'll like cross paths in giant packs of trained walkers, unison walkers. Fascinating. That's the extension of that, right? But when you do it naturally, that rhythm starts to meet. Your body just knows this. This is what we do. Right? It'll date back to traveling in packs of, hominids as we've traveled through things.
Like seeing a girl on the dance floor and you match her rhythm.
Seeing a girl on the dance floor and you match her rhythm, or you don't. You know, if you don't, good luck. But yeah, that's what we do. It's what humans do. And in fighting, there is actually, and I've done, anybody who's trained at low and mid levels have had this experience a great deal when you do tech sparring or light sparring or just doing light rounds with somebody. You start falling in and you start actually doing the same thing over and over, and you're not thinking about it. It just develops into a pattern. The goal of the fighter is to not have that. Like the girl who you can't dance with. It's like, fuck, I just can't fall into that rhythm with her. And that's what Darren was doing. It was impossible for you to fall into the rhythm, know where to be. He moves, you're not there, he's hitting you. What the fuck? This isn't working, right? I'm trying to pull analogies that we can all relate to. Once you get into that one where you are dancing with her, well, if Jorge's the girl, actually in that case, we'd be the girl. It's fucking Jorge, right? So if Jorge is the partner, once you fall into the dance rhythm, once he's got the rhythm down, he can punch you in the face because he knows where you are. And then he manipulates it. So now you're in the wrong place. Now you think it's a rhythm, and now he knows the rhythm. It's natural to him, so he put a little extra in.
Because he's leading the dance.
Leads the dance. That's another term that we use. And what does it mean? Well, once we've started, now you start dictating. But I don't want to lead the dance as in lead you to go with me. I want to lead you somewhere and fucking punch you in the face because you're in the wrong place for where you want to be and the right place for I want to be. Yes, this is all over, but it's very difficult. If I said to somebody, tell me what timing, hey, what did you think of this shot? They'll be like, awesome timing. I'll be like, define timing. Well, it's that. Yes, it's that. But if we can find other ways to relate to it, other terms for it, other connections to it, if we can connect it to something we've ever done and something that's been difficult for us to do or something we can't quite do but figure out how to do it, now we relate to it better. And people give me a lot of compliments on my 1-minute breakdowns on Instagram and Twitter is where I primarily put them. And a lot of compliments. And like, how do you know these things? It's like, I don't know more than I fucking don't know more than any of those. Name me a really good number 11, number 12 UFC fighter. John Lineker.
Right.
I don't know more than John Lineker as to fighting, but I can describe it because that's what I specialize in. I can make you understand it. I can connect you to it because I'm connected to it. John Lineker will fucking punch me in the face and I go to sleep. But if he punches somebody in the face and goes to sleep, I know how to describe it. That's what I've specialized my skill in. And the way there is here. This is how you get there. You fucking meander all over the place for long periods of time, thinking about it, writing it down, scrawling things out until you connect to it, that I know what it is, and it's still really hard to explain. But the decoding the rhythm is into that nature of falling into it where the two of you are going together. And now as he goes, you know where he's going and you exploit him. And in Jorge's case, what it started to be was, Jorge would move forward and Darren would move back. And when that happened, Jorge couldn't reach Darren and Darren could reach Jorge. That's simple. That, I think I nailed it very simply. If there's a large space between the two of us, and I move forward 2 feet, and you move back 2 feet, it is self-evident that the space is the same. That's what Darren did. And at the right time, that's what Darren did, is he maintained that gap in that way. Also, while he did it, he would be in a spot where then he could cover or parry, and it was quite simple. But his actions would be twofold simultaneously. Maintain the gap, and then take an action. Jorge would make him improperly move at the wrong time, but still take the action. So fake, you respond. Also, Darren slowed down ever so slightly to the point where he didn't quite know what was happening, didn't know the next dance move. He would cover. When he did, Jorge would start, you cover, then I hit you, right? If I hit your cover, no good. But if I fake, you cover on the fake, and then I hit you. It's quite simple, right? And you can do this with your brother. You can do it with your friend. Don't fucking fuck with your people. It's not nice. But you can do this with this part we all get. So we start doing that, and Darren starts to have to deal with that. It's a little stressful. He'd like to get back into leading it. He'd like to fall back into those footsteps together. He'd like to get the rhythm of the dance back. While he's dealing with that, Jorge starts, and I was watching this in the moments before, and I'm more deeply connected to some fights than others. But Jorge starts to switch his stance, sometimes with a minor threat, sometimes with a major threat, and sometimes just in odd ways, stepping back and forth. And I've talked about this a fair bit, and this, we'll go way deeper in this over the next year or two, because it's something people are doing a lot now. But when I show you something, I show you a pattern, or I show you a threat, or I show you a movement, you have two main options. The third one is your best, but you have two that you will default to. I'm going to show you a pattern. You will, one, try to decipher that pattern. Okay, this is out in the world. You see people act a certain way, things happen. Whenever someone does this thing happens. You see that pattern. This isn't unique to martial arts, and these are the places that studying martial arts has helped me in business and life and these things, because you see these patterns develop, right? And they're everywhere. It's over time, as you age and as you study things in this way and as you make those connections, it's almost like there are colors of patterns moving everywhere. You see, and you can predict things to a certain degree, which is why fighting is so beautiful, because the more you see, the less you can predict, because all of these patterns are unfolding. You have a better chance of predicting where Darren Till will be in 5 years than you do where he will be in his next fight. That's the beauty of it. But over time, you see these patterns starting to form. So you can try to decipher that pattern. So Jorge shows this footwork pattern while he's already stressing Darren's mind with the rhythmic stresses. And Darren can decipher it. Okay, what's he doing? Why is he trying to do it? Which is not always good, because now you've deployed a limited resource that we call attention and focus. You've deployed it on that, which, if I start fucking using too much of it, it's a renewable, it's a limited attention, focus is a limited but renewable resource. So I start looking at his feet, and they say, spend your attention, or they say, spend your time even. Any of these, you do spend them. You spend them. You spend attention. You have 100 of it, whatever that is, and you spend 70, you only got 30 left, and how quickly does it come back, right?
That must be fatiguing as well.
Yeah, and that's fatiguing. Thinking is heavily fatiguing. It fatigues your brain, but it fatigues your body as well. So, yeah. So now we're dealing with that. And the other option would be disregard the footwork. And this is all subconscious, because as you can imagine, this shit's happening very fast. So you've taught your body to make these choices. It's algorithmic, would be the way we would describe it. You've trained your body that in these situations, and your brain, this is how we'll behave. And as you fatigue, it doesn't behave the way you've trained it necessarily, so that becomes a problem. So we've trained our brain that, okay, if we're this tired, or our brain just decides I'm too tired, it disregards the footwork. And that's what we did with Jorge. That shit don't matter. Don't spend attention on it. Don't spend focus on it. Don't spend time on it. Don't spend brain space on it. Forget about it. Well, that was the wrong situation here, because then if you look at the moment, Jorge switches quickly to southpaw and blitzes from southpaw, all of which was footwork based, all of which was disregarded because we've already decided, it's called chunking. The brain chunks information. And we've already chunked that information with the feet, and Darren Till's fatigued brain says, I don't want to deal with that. Then when it happens, it knocks him out cold. So long description. And you know why? Because it's fucking complex shit. If it is possible to explain that wonderful knockout in less time than I've done it in any meaningful way, then you're not really going to dig into it. Something so beautiful as being in love with the person that you know, your partner, or seeing the sunrise, or watching a knockout like that, if you can explain it in a shorter way, you're not explaining it deeply enough that it deserves, because of how special it is. And that's what you're looking at. I will offer you, I got that from Chael, by the way.
I offer you this.
Yeah, I offer you this. He said it to me. I hadn't been watching all of his stuff. It's hard to watch everybody's stuff when you're making stuff. But if you watch any of mine, you know that I admire Chael greatly, and I appreciate him greatly. He says, I offer you this. So I will, in the words of Chael Sonnen, I will offer you this. that footwork, my duress brain, if I'm Darren or you or me, our brains are not prepared and trained in this way. Darren's has been prepared this way. We can decipher that footwork, or we can disregard it. Same thing with any other information, or we can treat it with awareness. Okay, that's the third one, and that's the best choice. Now, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I don't even think I need to say that sentence anymore. I think people who love the podcast are thrilled about that, and people who don't love the podcast, they probably won't come back, so it's irrelevant. But I can decipher the information I've been shown, or I can disregard it. There are other things that could happen. I could not even recognize it, which is what happens to Mark, myself, or you if we're fighting Jorge Masvidal. We just don't recognize it at all. And at a high level, some might not either. If somebody's much better than the person they're fighting, that could also happen. But then you can treat it with awareness. Now, in meditation, in modern meditation today, you hear people say a term called non-judgmental awareness. Mark, you ever heard that term? No. So if you were to meditate, which is very beneficial, there's no question, you're training your mind. Meditation is an important part of training your mind for anything. Of course, fighting. There are many ways to meditate. Some people do it running. Some people do it sitting. Some people do it, in the painting and the things they love. There's many ways to meditate, but you can just sit and meditate. And when you hear people talk about it in sort of a new modern way, they'll say, you must, what you're searching for is non-judgmental awareness. Now, awareness is to be aware of something, to see or sense or observe something that you see, that you feel to be true, is innately non-judgmental. I don't have an opinion if I'm aware of something, if I'm truly aware, and I don't judge it. Okay? And I know that sounds all over the place, but these are real aspects of interacting with the world, and these are meaningful aspects depending on how you want to process the world around you, right? Non-judgmental awareness is how people describe it, but that word non-judgmental does not need to be there, because awareness at its core has no judgment and has no opinion. And that's how you want to be when somebody is offering you a feint or a threat, or they're an opening. That's one that happens a lot. It's like, oh, look, his right elbow is flared. I can kick him in the rib. To be aware of that is not to leap at it. It's not to judge it. It's not to assign meaning to it, because incorrectly is whether it's Jorge's feet or Robin's elbow being flared. My elbow being flared, you can kick me in the ribs. Awareness would be to be aware simply that my elbow was flared. Judgment, an opinion, and projection of meaning would be to say, he's fucked up, he doesn't know his elbow is flared, I should kick him in the ribs. Well, what if I'm offering that to you because I want you to kick at my rib, right? This awareness is the state you want to be in when you're fighting. Deep, right?
Yeah, well, at what point does a fighter's experience level bring him to that level of objectivity? When does that fight IQ get developed?
So that's the perfect question, and the truth is that it's only through experience. It's only through experience. But all of those experiences can be sped and will be sped. There'll be 22-year-olds who know these things that it took fucking Matt Hume, 30 years to learn, and the other modern greats, it took them so long. Bruce Lee is part of our podcast today. It took these people lifetimes to learn these things, but even just by hearing about these subjects and talking about these truths about fighting and gathering of information in combat and stuff, that will allow you to look at it in yourself as you train. So a 25-year-old can do that now if they were aware of these things. They did enough rounds of getting comfortable, being able to perform. Bear in mind, again, this is all happening in milliseconds. So you cannot think about that. If you find yourself going, his elbow's open, I wonder if he's doing that on purpose, or I wonder if that means I can kick him in the ribs and therefore win the fight. You're fucking unconscious. So you're training this, you're training the behavior in your mind to be able to do this. And just this conversation, this very conversation, I will get a Chris Weidman or, you know, Joseph Benavidez or whoever. They will say, holy fuck, Robin. Yeah, people don't usually talk about that, but you're right. That's what's happening. And fuck, of course I know I'm right. This is what's happening. It's just very difficult to talk about. Not only to, first you must understand it. First, you must understand what is really happening. And I used this on a breakdown this week, and there's a Bruce Lee question coming up in here, but a famous Bruce Lee quote, and I've quoted it before, is when I first started studying the arts, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just like a kick. After I studied the martial arts, I realized, or I felt a punch was more than a punch and a kick was more than a kick. And once I truly understood it, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. They're not playing cards. We're not just choosing, I'm going to throw the right hand and you're going to use, you know, the block card, and then I'm going to play my bink card and you're going to play the dodge card. They're not playing cards. This is all a dynamic happening through complex, highly developed brains. And it's real. There is nothing that I've said here that isn't based in truth, in reality. I'm just still working on the ways to try to explain it in a meaningful way that can be related to. But that's what was happening. And so as you fatigue, it is harder for your brain to fucking make sense of all this shit. And the only way you can ever make sense of it is just like Mark's question, practice. Over time, because at first anytime I throw a right hand, you'll be like, he's thinking about throwing a right hand. But on the high levels, we'll talk about this next week, but on fucking Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya, it isn't about, well, he used a lot of feints. Of course he fucking used a lot of feints. I mean, that's present at there was some fantastic footwork and a lot of feints to be able to set up the perfect shot. Well, yeah. But what really is happening? What's really the experience like between them? We have a long fucking way to go, but that's what I want to be able to talk about. And Jorge versus Darren Till allowed me to be able to see some of it. It's just a long way to go. So off topic, but I'm writing a book with Dr. David Klonsky, and we're trying to book a couple of writing. It's a book on combat sports psychology. He's a professor of psychology, and I'm a guy who studies martial arts. Dedicated his life to studying martial arts, and together we're friends, and we've really found something here. But each layer that we go into, this conversation that we just had, or I just said at you, is making the book harder to write, because this is true. This is what's happening. It's very difficult to make sense of that. And I don't want to just make sense of it for some fucking martial arts obsessives like us. I want my mom to be able to pick that up and have eureka moments as she's understanding what's happening. And that's going to be very fucking difficult. Very difficult. But hey man, I'm up for it. I'm up for the work. As long as I don't die before I get there, and I can't control that. So all I can do is just keep working and trying to get better, and I value your feedback, and you guys are a big part of this process. So while we're on this topic, we were talking about the changes in their life that happens, right? The changes that take place in their life. In the big picture, honestly, nothing changed for Darren Till. If Darren Till gets to do what I would hope that this young, ferocious martial artist gets to do, this changed absolutely nothing. So Darren Till's what, 24? So let's say he's 24. Could be 23, could be 25. But let's say he's about approximately 24. If he's going to fight until he's 36, 37 years old, fight for titles, achieve many things, nothing, in that context, nothing changed. His job is to get better every day, fight as well as he can, fight to win, learn from his successes, learn from his failures, and continue to develop. And in that macro, fuck all changed for Darren Till. Just as your setbacks, if your goal is to talk about martial arts for a living, or your goal is to become a swim teacher, or you're going to make the best bongs the world has ever seen, or invent something new and you have setbacks, fuck all changes for you. You gathered more information. You experienced some failure and some setback and some pain. And that's probably going to help you grow, and it's going to suck right now. But nothing changed. And the same is true for Darren Till. Now, before you get mad at me or you prepare the counter argument, I will offer you this. I love Chael Sonnen. Very few people. Joe Rogan's one of the few, my wife and Mark and my closest friends and stuff. But outside of, Joe's one of the few people I love more than Chael. Chael's been extraordinarily generous with me. And so I offer you this.
Side note, check out on Chael's YouTube channel his post-fight on Masvidal. He does the breakdown in a car on the highway next to another car that's literally lit on fire.
No way. Fucking crazy. Yeah, crazy. Where was I going? It was the future. Yeah, before you prepare your argument, I do offer you this. Actually, I acknowledge this. In the short term, a lot changed for Darren Till, right? A lot changed for him.
Yep.
And let's just say that we'll call it a fork. Okay? Simple. Fork. Darren Till gets hit by that punch, and his life forks off on a different short path. Well, that path is still moving towards the same goals and destinations in the same process. Get better all the time, grow, improve, become a better person, become better at training. But in that fork, there's a short-term change. Because let's say that punch doesn't land. Now, there's thousands of forks off there. Because that punch doesn't land, but he wins the fight, or that punch doesn't land, but then Jorge lands a head kick later, or, they get disqualified. All that happens is wherever that thing was going, wherever all of the spider web of that night was going, disqualification, greatest win ever for Darren Till, some strange thing, the power went off, and that whatever was going to happen, it now changed. He lost consciousness, and that ended that stream. And now he enters a different path in the short term that in the long term changes nothing. And that is he must fight somebody else. If that other fork leads to him winning that fight, well, fuck. We're fighting, maybe we're going up to 185 and fighting the winner of, we're fighting for a title, who the fuck knows? Yeah, who would have been
better position?
Who would have been? He's talking about Colby Covington, or he's talking about Usman.
Fought the winner of Covington Usman, or
or Leon Edwards.
A number one contender match.
Leon Edwards, holding pattern until then, but that's all changed now. That's all changed. But in the big picture of his life, and that's why. And here's my point. So instead, who did Leon Edwards beat? Gunnar.
Oh yeah, Gunnar Nelson. Yeah.
Oh fuck! Let's see that fight. Yeah. let's see Darren Till fight Gunnar Nelson.
Gunnar, yeah, that would be good.
That would be really good. Gunnar Nelson also had a great fight. That's a great fight for Gunnar Nelson, and I say that with all honesty as a guy who appreciates Gunnar and knows that he's a big picture guy. Well, shit, if there's something missing, he wants to know it, and he got to know it in that fight. And they said it was the way he separates. And they noticed that, and fucking Daniel Cormier is the heavyweight champion of the world because of understanding that those punches on the separation are massive. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm not trying to go back in time. But that's been there a long time. I think I got a Cormier Jones breakdown that I did at either Fight Network or for the UFC when I worked at Fight Network, and it was looking at those zones, and it's showing Cormier punching into and out of that range. That's been there for a long time, and Stipe, if you'd watched that breakdown, it's been there. And it's been there for everybody. There's a lot of these places where there's that free shot, that big shot, that fight-changing shot is available. The next one is when people are standing up against the fence. That one's sitting there waiting. It's been waiting for a long time. Yeah. That one's been sitting there waiting for a long time. Fight finishing shots during the sequence when we go up from you're on 4 points and I'm on your back up for both guys. But mostly for now, for the guy on the back.
Seems like it's being utilized more or less these days by people with Thai boxing backgrounds.
Yeah, head kick or elbow people are using there, but there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of these spaces still in the game, still there, where you can train things in those gaps. I don't know how or why, they're training up kicks specifically. If I was fighting Khabib or, any of the fucking Ben Askren, any of these guys, we would be adding 20 minutes of training pads, up kicks for, months.
Gegard knocked out Jacare in Dream.
Still there.
Beautiful knockout.
That's still there. That spot, that attack in that spot is still there. And the attack during the separation has always been there. And it'll always be there until we change how we separate or we attack. Chris Weidman drops Anderson maybe in their second fight, but it could have been the first fight. Anderson's looking for offense and Chris fucking throws offense back. He doesn't defend. He doesn't move to defend. And same thing, I've seen Matt Brown do that. Lots of guys. During anything where you do something and the correct, and I'm air quoting for people listening on podcasts, thank you. The correct thing is to defend. Anytime that's true, if I attack instead, doesn't attack there for me. Anytime the correct move is for me to defend. Because if the correct move for me to do is defend, then you are trained to expect me to defend. All your training partners do it. Everybody does it. It's, quote, correct. Anytime something is correct to do, is a chance where I get to attack. But that aside, but yes, Gunnar will be thrilled. He won't be thrilled at the loss, but he will be thrilled to have found something that not only can he change in himself, but he can exploit in others because it's still there. But yeah, so Darren, till now, he discovers that seasoning, that experience, that sensitivity to these things, that, what it is to be a true veteran, a true master. That's what fucking Jorge is. He's a master. All these top guys, that's what they are. They're masters. And the true masters back in the day, actually, we're going to carry this over. So trust me on this for Bruce Lee. And if you are watching this as a separate segment, I don't think you are because, oh yeah, maybe you are. If you are, please check out Ask Robin Black because I'm going to touch on this. But these things just change over time. They do. And so Darren Till, in the long run, is going to get better every day. He's learned what these masters can do, and it's going to insist on him that he becomes one. What is Darren Till now? He's a young, ferocious, hard-hitting, confident, big, strong, talented martial artist. Well, that's brilliant. What a fucking great place to be. And now we start to add all those extra layers that can only be earned through time and learning and commitment to study. It's beautiful. We move on. I don't know if I answered any questions. I don't know if there were any questions. But that was a genuine pleasure. This is a workout for my brain, and it's a thrill for me. We move on to Ask Robin Black. Now, I'm going to start... There is some questions on USADA and TJ Dillashaw, who at the time of this podcast is suspended a year and departed with his belt. We're going to come back to that. But I'm going to start with two questions. We may add a third one. So Mark, group these together. Yep. Two questions for Ask Robin Black. They carry over nicely from what we just discussed from Jorge Masvidal versus Darren Till. At Hokolu Andy, Ask Robin Black, what was Bruce Lee's impact on martial arts and MMA? We'll also, you know what we're going to add to this? This is from 2017. I just found it when I was looking at hashtag Ask Robin Black. How do you get over that, quote, wall in jiu-jitsu? And we could put in anything there. Mm-hmm. Playing piano, fucking, running marathons, whatever. When you feel you've plateaued. Mm-hmm. Okay? So what was Bruce Lee's impact on martial arts and MMA? And how do you get over that wall in jiu-jitsu or any other thing you're studying and training in when you feel you've plateaued? So I will quickly pull up Bruce Lee and plateau. And so... the reason I do that is when you ask me, what did Bruce Lee contribute in martial arts and MMA, and we'll talk maybe about MMA a little more specifically in a second. What was his impact on martial arts? And of course it was massive. But for me, it is philosophical, and of course, brilliant martial arts. Brilliant martial artist, and taught brilliant systems, and was early ahead of everybody, at least anybody documented. I'm sure in the hundreds of years and then thousands of years that humans have used their body for combat, other people have had this philosophy. But the one we know a lot, and as it translates into MMA, is the philosophy of use what works and discard what doesn't, right? And that is MMA. At least it is the essence of what it should be. We make errors, and we make errors. We find ourselves in places where we think that today we know everything, but back then everything was really dumb and nobody knew anything. My friend David Mullins, who he's starting a podcast. He asked me to be on it. I don't know when we're going to do it. Mullins just messaged me. He asked me to be his first guest. I don't know if he's made one. He just didn't get me yet. But he said that when his wife and he were going to, I guess they call them Lamaze classes, and they're walking you through how to breathe and how to connect to your body and how to do this thing. He said they watched this whole video and it was black and white, and everybody in the room was like, God, people knew so little then. Look how dumb we were. And of course, he's brilliantly connected to how the world changes. And he was like, what most people don't think is that today is that. Like 20 years from now, people will look at today and think we were fucking idiots. The way we acted, the way we thought, the things we believed. And not because everything will change. Most things won't change. They'll just, more information will be gleaned. Some things will be turned out to be untrue. Something massive could collapse. Physics itself could end up being like, once you introduce one other thing, it all changes. More likely, there'll be small changes. As new things are understood, there'll be changes in belief. But today is that. Okay? So mistakenly thinking, people sometimes think, well, MMA is this, and this. Always do this and never do that. We've talked about that a lot. If you believe that, ever, you are just as rudimentary and just as primitive as whatever you're comparing it to, because there is never a correct way to fight. There is never a rule that says always or never, unless it's based on universal truths. But Bruce Lee, and I think had he been around longer, instead of passing young, he would have said, take what works and discard what doesn't, but then always go back and look at the things you've discarded and see if they will work in the new reality. Because that is true. And certain things that he said, always, not always, but he preferred to fight with strong hand forward. He would have said, for now, in the paradigm as it exists, and once everyone is doing that, I will do the other. So by passing away, he never got to extrapolate on some ideas that would have been universal about change itself, but it allowed us to see those things that we'd have never seen without his work. And the more, I don't study all of Bruce Lee's work, although I admire the man. He's tattooed on my body. But I don't study his work specifically because I don't want to copy his work. I just want to be informed by it, and so I allow all of it, so much of it to come in. But the brilliant thing that I've discovered over time is the more I learn, the more that I learn about truths and how the truths of things change, the more when I come across things of his that I didn't understand, now I understand. So plateaus. If you always put limits on everything you do, physical or anything else, it will spread into your work and into your life. There are no limits. There are only plateaus, and you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. All right? I mean, that's... So what's he saying there? If we start with the last sentence, there are only plateaus, and you must not stay. There are no limits. There are only plateaus, and you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. Correct? I think anybody who, is progressing in their life agrees with that. I think whatever you study or whatever you teach or whatever you have studied, you agree with that. But that doesn't answer your question. How do you get over the wall where you feel you've plateaued? And maybe, if we go back to the earlier part, we will decipher the answer. If you always put limits on everything you do, physical or anything else, it will spread into your work or your life. So I think there lies in some of our answer. Limits. You're putting limits on yourself. You know, we're all doing it. The world around us does it. Rules do it. The police does it. The internet does it. Society does it. But they're not real. You know? And don't take this to the extreme, because limits and plateaus and challenges that are incrementally done, if you lived long enough, you would achieve things you could never imagine, as long as you did them one at a time. Let's say that somebody born in 2030 had the right amount of information on how to train some aspect of humanity that if they lived till they were 200, they could fly. I'm not saying that's true, but let's say that's true. That some amount of knowledge and manipulation of our essence and how we think and the way that the activities of our brain works. And yes, this sounds stupid, but it's not. Okay, it's not if you just extrapolate what we've done from when we were, you know, fish swimming, when we were, you know, single tadpoles and or single-celled organisms to where we're going. Right. If you extrapolate that, you're like, actually, that doesn't sound all that crazy, right? Let's say it would be 1,000,000 years from now, regardless. That doesn't mean we can fly right now. Okay, so when I say don't put limits on yourself, or we paraphrase Bruce Lee and say don't put limits on yourself, also don't be crazy. You know, the fact that you know, if you had 37 generations of you that one day in the future they could fly, that doesn't mean jump out of the window, right? But if you believe that anything is possible and you work with that idea in your mind, of course anything is possible, especially if you think in terms of a long, long life, right? What if you're 15 years old right now? What if by the time you're 50, you were able to do the thing you dreamed of? Well, fuck, you'd probably, well, you might not, because it sounds like a long fucking time when you're 15, but it isn't. Time is fucking malleable. It just happens. You might do it. But if you think, I can't do that, I'll never do that, there's no chance I'll do that, you won't, right? You won't. It's putting the limitations on yourself that limits those plateaus. I can't, I'm too tired. Right, and if we're going to use, and at Esto416BJJ, this was from 2017. I hope you still train BJJ, and I hope you know the answer to this already. But if I'm too tired, I can't, or I'm not flexible enough, I can't, those are where the plateaus come from. Of course, you'll find plateaus, but they will be easier to pass if you don't limit yourself.
And even if it's within your gym, you know, if you feel like you've plateaued with your training partners or your coaching,
yeah.
Get a day pass, go visit another gym, roll with some other people, get a new perspective.
Exactly. It goes back to something we talked about earlier today. Accept the things you cannot change. That's tricky too, because you better be right about them. And have the courage to change the things you can. Okay? If you very well could be wrong that you haven't plateaued with your coach. You plateaued in the way you're hearing your coach, and you could work on that. That's a you thing. Yeah. But if you have, or if there's something there or something about it, yes, of course, you change things. You improve things. You don't limit yourself. And it doesn't mean this isn't Oprah, you know, although no disrespect to Oprah. It's like, fucking good on Oprah for doing Oprah. That's amazing. If I'm correct as in my imagination of where she started out to where she went, how the fuck would that human being have done that if she fucking believed that there were limitations in her world? You know? So no disrespect, but this is not that. This is not the secret. This is not. If you say, I can't do something, you are correct. If you say, I might be able to do something with a lot of hard work, you might not be correct. But at least you'll fucking go down the path and you'll get a lot closer to it. Michael Chandler, who I admire greatly, and I'm working really hard on being able to go do a piece with Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler posted something the other day about safety. And Chandler, might have to go back one or two. Pushing the limits of what the human body is capable of. Every time I fall short, the mark I hit is miles ahead of where I was supposed to end up when I was told to play it safe. Michael Chandler, ladies and gentlemen. Let's look at that one more time. pushing Michael Chandler. Of course, he's standing there looking like he's made out of iron because that's his name. It's not his name that got him that way. Pushing the limits of what the human body is capable of. Every time I fall short, the mark I hit is miles ahead of where I was supposed to end up when I was told to play it safe. So if you think I can't do it, that's the mark you'll hit. If you think I might be able to do it if I just work my ass off, you might not do it. But wherever you get is a lot further than if you said I can't do it. And that's the root of plateaus. Having said that, there will be some. And one of the aspects of what a plateau is sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's pain. Sometimes it's physical limitations. But boredom is no different than any of these others. Discomfort. Right? Discomfort. I can't go past this deadlift weight because it hurts. I can't go past it because I have a physical challenge. I can't go past it because I'm bored. It's just all different forms of discomfort. And a plateau, the way you get past it is you work past it. And the way you work past it is continue to work. And the way you continue to work is you get fucking comfortable with discomfort. And that can be trained. That can be developed. Are you comfortable with discomfort? No? Okay, well, train that. Train that. Robin, how do I train fucking being comfortable with discomfort? Well, what are you uncomfortable doing? You know? Well, I feel weird when I'm by myself and the room's quiet. Cool. Do that for 30 seconds. And then tomorrow, do that for 45 seconds. Just fucking train it. But again, that goes to limitations. Can you train? Can you do the shit that needs to be done? Of course you can. You just have to know you can. Once you know you can train anything, you'll train anything. And the truth is you can train anything. You can.
The Musashi quote, once you see the way in one, you see the way in all.
That's true.
You supply your expertise and you're able to pick things up.
That's true. Is that the actual quote? Rogan threw that quote at me when I did his show.
Yeah, it's a common Rogan quote, but it's from the Book of Five Rings.
Yeah. He threw that at me, I think, the first time I saw him. I remember so detailed the conversations I had with that man. Yeah, you see the way in all. It's true. Which is also why something we were talking about today, you study martial arts long enough, you see how it connects to your life. You got to figure out how to train your way out of a half guard, and then, you can't get out of it, so you train harder and harder and harder, and eventually you can sweep somebody. That's life. You see the way in all.
Joe Schilling is a really good example. Have you seen the improvements in his ground game?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's very well related to his training and discipline as a world champion kickboxer.
People are fascinated. I'm fucking fascinated by Joe Schilling. And my buddy Bobby T, I think, is following him around this weekend for DAZN. I would have loved to be there. You got a guy disciplined enough to improve that much in grappling. Of course, he's around Diaz and all kinds of great people, and works hard. But he also not disciplined enough to not smoke cigarettes. I fucking love it. But yes, so thank you for those questions. There's a third one, Mark. Maybe you can add it here. If Mark doesn't add it, and he just didn't, he was cutting these up and he didn't see this clip. That's no big deal. At Erdenzil, how competitive do you believe a top-level Shoalin Kung Fu monk would be in the MMA world? I like it. And we just talked about the Book of Five Rings, and once you see the way in one thing, you see it in all. It's true of figuring out how some of these things unfold, how some things, when you see the flow of the process, you can see the process, you can see the movement, you can see the living thing that is these things. If you are a karate master or a boxer or really tall or really short or very something or not quite something enough, the whole point of mixed martial arts, which is true of any, the idea of generalism or being a generalist in life. If somebody is a better photographer than you, but you're really good at taking photos, editing photos, naming photos, putting photos on Instagram, you can become much more successful than that great photographer. We all have to learn to be generalists. It's the world that we're living in. We must. And a Shaolin monk, if you're a generalist, you'll beat them. you know, unless you're unconscious, which then you don't beat anybody. And of course that can happen. But in the long run, over time, Shaolin monk who's trained in a particular form of striking, that form of striking is unfamiliar to a ton of martial artists, and so maybe they'd knock him out. And then it would become a little more familiar, and in that time, that Shaolin monk's entire job, like Joe Schilling or anybody else, would be to become good at the other things that they didn't learn as a Shaolin monk. Because in the year it would take for people to figure out their weird arrhythmic movements and punching and kicking and striking and elbowing that they learned in their environment that is unfamiliar to the opponents, in the year it would take in 3 fights for people to start to figure it out, they better fucking figure out how to do the things they don't know how to do. Wrestle or grapple or separate when somebody grabs you, whatever it is. Because by then, people are going to know it. And it just becomes a race. It becomes a time race. And an opportunity cost. You know what an opportunity cost is? Mark, do you know the definition of opportunity cost? I'll tell you. It's a really cool thing. It's a really cool concept that applies to everything in life. And it applies to everything you do every single day. And lots of people know it. I'll just get the real definition. Opportunity cost definition. The loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. Okay? So I got 22 hours of physical movement I can do in a week as a good athlete that needs to recover. For some it'll be 16, maybe for some it's a few hours more, for some it's 12 or 14. I got 14 hours to train physically. If I put all those 14 hours into kicking people in the face, it's going to make me good at kicking people in the face. But the opportunity cost is the cost that I won't be able to wrestle or grapple or dance or move or play piano or sing or be a good father. Opportunity cost is a part of how you assess anything in life. Now, again, it's something we learn from looking at these things. You look at a Shaolin monk who knows how to punch and kick in a different way. How much of that do they have to, any amount of training that they've done to create that knowledge base and athletic platform that they have, what do they have to give up that and add something else? There's an opportunity cost there. And if they train only, you're a brand new fighter, you're a boxer. Floyd Mayweather is going to fight somebody in 1 year. And that guy's a pretty good generalist. He's a pretty good MMA fighter. It's what would Floyd be, 135 pounds?
Yeah, you'd be 135.
So who, well, I was going to say John Lineker, but actually that'd be really fun. Who did Cody Garbrandt go 3 rounds with? Cody Garbrandt. I'll tell you.
I almost want to say a sunset, but I know that's
nope,
wrong.
It was before that. Cody Garbrandt went 3 rounds with Marcus Brimage. Wow. No, I was thinking of Henry Briones. I fucking forgot. I better go back and watch that Marcus Brimage fight. I'm down for some of that. Let's put Floyd Mayweather versus Augusto Mendez or Marcus Brimage. Marcus Brimage in 1 year. So what's Marcus Brimage going to do that whole year? Now you're training him, Mark. You're training Marcus Brimage to fight Floyd Mayweather in let's say 6 months. What are you going to do?
Training for
what kind of training are you going to specialize for Marcus Brimage to fight Floyd Mayweather in 6 months?
Speed.
Yeah, we're going to make him faster. We're going to make him close distance. We're going to make him grab. We're going to make him body lock. We're going to make him wrestle. We're going to make him fight on top. We're just going to do that like fucking crazy. If we do all of that, the opportunity cost is we can't box. Right? Can't box. So if we end up boxing, we're fucked, right? Or we could spread it out because we're like, well, on the other hand, Floyd's opportunity cost in 6 months, if all he's doing is wrestling, defending wrestling, whatever, I still think we're good enough that we don't even need to do that much. Like whatever you choose to train, in that time, you cannot choose to train something else. That time only gets used once. So Floyd, you train almost entirely moving away and striking, backing up, circling out, breaking grips. What we don't train is to defend singles and doubles. Well, I mean, we only have 6 months. If someone's that deep, we're already fucked. So we're going to train to be never that deep. difficult, but we only have 6 months. But it's difficult because we better get it right. So do you see what opportunity cost is? Like, you can only do this or this. And, you know, if you apply that to anything, Mark and I want to do a podcast tomorrow. Well, shit, I'm also supposed to do this, but if I do that, it will help the podcast. Like, if you think in terms of opportunity cost in almost anything, it helps you make a choice, because you have today one time. You have this hour once, right? So, and that's true in the micro too. I hear this, you know, we have to work in reality, and it's my job and my passion to peel back layers until we can work in reality. You see a fight and people are like, that guy should punch more. Every moment you punch is a moment you cannot do something else. It isn't just do everything exactly the same plus more volume. I never use that term. It just sounds weird now that everybody uses it as if it's like a category, like you know, salt or you know, milk. It's strange, but you know, more larger amount, punch more, you know, more volume, or, you know, be more active. To do anything means whatever you were doing in that time you can't do. And if it was something as simple as resting or gathering information or staying vigilant or being aware or being defensive, opportunity cost is you can only do one thing at a time. Now, that's not true either, because what if, you know, we'll wrap this thought up in a second, and this will probably be the only Ask Robin Black question today. Oh, no, I better talk about TJ too. You know, what if we have, 10 months, it's 40 weeks. 40 weeks is 280 days. At 10 hours would be 28, no. So 10 months, 40 weeks, times 7, 280 days. If each day had 10 hours, that would be 2,800 days. Each day had 20 hours, that would be 5,600 days. So we're getting we're getting into like 6,000 hours. We could spend 6,000 hours on training jiu-jitsu, or we could spend the first 3,000 on getting better at learning, right? Like, what if we spent it, if there is such a thing, what if we spent that time to just be able to get more out of training, right? You start seeing where I'm fucking going with this shit, right? So we have 6,000 hours, and it's more than that, you know, but we have 6,000 hours we wanted to accomplish something. So what's this old saying? If you had somebody, I saw this, if you had 1 hour to chop down a tree, I'll paraphrase it as best I can. Mark, you got 10 hours to chop down a tree. What are you going to do? Chop down the tree. Right. I will spend 6 hours sharpening the axe first. Right? I apologize. I did a shitty job of paraphrasing whatever that actual quote is. But isn't that fucking...
Gist of it.
Yeah, think about that. Think about that. You got an axe. Now, first of all, we got to have an axe sharpening tool, right? But if we do have an axe sharpening tool, what amount of your allotted time can you spend getting better at using time, right? Whoa. Now you start to see it isn't opportunity cost changes when the cost lowers. You know, same thing. If you're fitter, how much more can you accomplish in that time? If you're more rested. So how much of your life should you spend getting rest, meditating, reading, you know, eating well? The more you spend on these, the more efficient you use the thing. So it isn't the same for everybody. A high-performing individual uses their time better than somebody terribly out of shape with a terrible diet and so forth, right? And you wonder when you see The Rock, how the fuck does The Rock do all these things? Like, you know, he's got at this point, he's got a personal dietitian. He's probably got a lot of steroids. Not probably. He's got a specialized doctor who has figured out exactly how to optimize whatever his body is in ways we can't even understand. Even the highest level experts are doing probably literally experimenting human optimization within The Rock. And no judgment. Yeah. He's got a nutritionist, a dietitian. He's got his own personal trainer. All of that is making him optimized to the point that he performs well on 6 hours sleep, and in the hours he has, he fucking does a lot more than we do because he's more optimal. Anyways,
now for lower level fighters, that would make sense for them to optimize that time and manage it. At what point should it become on the coaches to be in charge of optimizing the time, because they have the better hindsight?
Yeah. So
they can see what's going on.
Yeah. It's very difficult. So the process of learning to know yourself well enough, this is a really, really great point. The process of learning to know yourself well enough is a long process in and of itself. So if you had to do all of that, yeah, you might not be good at that until you're in your, later. Also, if you didn't know how to take care of your body, be fit, be healthy, you injure yourself, and all that time you can allot to becoming the best athlete or whatever it is gone. So the right people is massively key, because every time you have someone around you with that knowledge, you get some of that knowledge. Because if you're smart and you're trusting and you've selected the right people to trust, because that's going to be on you too, then you get to follow their advice on things. You say, Aaron Pico, talk about him a lot because he's a brilliant athlete that's on a cool and interesting and fascinating path. His own family had to explain to him that a racehorse will run itself until it dies. It will run until it's dead. And Aaron Pico would train until he dies. And before he died, he would just blow out his knees, and then, he'd become depressed, and then who knows what he would do, and, how his life would unfold. He needs people, because left to their own devices, overtraining is just as bad as not training enough.
Yep.
So all of this is part of the complex spider web of these things. So when somebody's like, is Darren Till a future champ? Well, everything I just told you is at fucking play in that. Everything. And the correct answer isn't yes, but then somebody blows out their shoulder and you go, oh, yeah, they would have been, but they blew their shoulder. The blowing of their shoulder is part of that path. And you ask somebody to predict the future, they have to predict being around the right people, learning the right things, never having somebody around them who takes... How many fighters and football players and rock stars have we seen where somebody comes into their life and fucking takes them down the wrong path? They lose all their money, they get overconfident. All these things are real.
I mean, it seems like the people who will be in the best position to succeed in the sport will be the final evolution form of Rory McDonald, where you start at the ground floor, at the very beginning in a big gym, and they take you along the way, and they're at the driver's seat essentially.
Whatever anybody has learned at any point, that become, if it's real and it's meaningful and there's smart people who come along and gather that information, that now becomes available younger. Mm-hmm. So everything Rory now knows and his coaches now know about him, we can now apply to a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old. If that's really, but it better be the right person, because if that human being, because a 12-year-old's a human, they're their own human. They better truly be obsessively passionate about this. You push somebody who isn't, they're going to hurt themselves or fucking quit or find drugs or gambling or some other thing, because that's not their real path. So you have to find the right person on the right path, then find the right people who have learned everything that there is to learn about how Rory has patterned, and now apply it younger. Any little error and changes and optimization through there. So, and that's why fucking go on your phone and look up hip-hop, dance, boxing, anything. There's a 6-year-old out there going to blow your fucking mind.
Jody Emery.
Yeah.
The little girl.
Yeah. Yeah, little Jody. Little Jody Muay Thai. What Jody the Beast?
Yep.
Yeah. At Jody the Beast. Shout out. And fucking she's motivated too. Jody will send me things saying, hey, when are you going to break down my shit? Now, that could be somebody else in her family, but I suspect it's her. Shout out to the young Jody. And there's anything. Is singing. There's kids. Go on. This is a little more disturbing, but you go on YouTube and you find a kid 6 years old, and they'll be exactly like somebody from Fox News. Nailing it, explaining it, why this is bad and that's bad, and we should hate the wall and whatever, and disturbing, but it's emulation. Everything that's been learned can now be emulated. Doesn't mean you understand it, and that's where something wobbles. Life experience is still real because you connect to it. It's in your skin. Imitating something, if you don't, in some cases, you don't need to know why, if high jumpers jump this way. You just need to learn it. But in other things, it's things that are artistic or that are based on knowledge and collections of knowledge, they better be connected to you deeply. Just repeating what Bruce Lee said will not make you understand what Bruce Lee said. You know, but it's fuck, we live in a fascinating world. It's going to get more fascinating. Let's do another Ask Robin Black. And we were going to also do some lightweight division related fight previews. We'll see how we do it. Moving on, Ask Robin Black. We got a twofold question. We can put them together. At Chad Garrett. I got them written down too, Mark, so you can have them. Ask Robin Black, when can we expect the UFC to get rid of USADA and PED testing in general? It's a gross impediment to the sport, while fighters are significantly impaired in their recovery from injuries and training. USADA has been awful. And then at Talvin Kipapa. What up, brother? Thanks for always supporting and encouraging. Where does Coach Bang and TJ go from here? Now, if you're just a martial arts fan, and if you are, we love you. We relate to you. And you don't follow the UFC, fighting organization. You might not know this, but most of you know. Either very recently or a while back, depending on when you listen to this or watch this, TJ Dillashaw got binked for having some type of substance in his blood. Now, or urine or DNA. they don't check your DNA, but now at this time we don't know what it is. I suspect, you know, if you're guessing, things that are weight loss related, could be something, might not be. It's a guess, logical guess.
Just based off the situation, he was going down in weight. Yeah. Most likely, people are saying it's diuretic.
Yeah. So diuretics are actually something that causes your body to rid itself of liquids, and so it's even more aggressive than normal dehydration. Your body pees out its stores of liquid, and of course it's dangerous because these are people who are already trying to dehydrate themselves in other ways, and diuretics rid you of some of your fluids. So that's one possibility. There are also, you know, anabolic related agents that are used for the cutting and leaning out of mass. When you see Mr. Universe and they're like, you know, their arms are bigger than me, but there's like veins and fucking striations. And I saw a guy, and I used to work at Extreme Couture in Toronto, and we brought in a Mr. Universe for, it was like 2 or 3 days after he won. So those guys, when you win, you immediately get these I'm sure it's different now, there's Instagram and everything, but you immediately get these big contracts. And that one was Muscle Tech, which was in Mississauga. And they have a deal where they're going to pay you, let's say it's $500,000. It's fucking a lot. 300,000, 400,000, $500,000, I don't know. I don't know the numbers. It's a lot. And in those 4 or 5 days after, it's just fucking photo shoot. Because they are creating a moment. That moment that they stand on that stage is the moment.
They're at their best cut.
Yeah.
They're looking
for months, all leading up, hours leading up to it. It's like, and the difference between TJ Dillashaw on a scale, or, you know, when I would make weight, or anyone who's ever fought in any type of competition that you have to make weight, these guys got to perform. Like, you don't just have to, you just go up and you stand on this thing and your coach holds you and then they say your weight and for a moment you feel good and then you leave. These guys are like fucking performing with confidence. They're trying to sell like a feeling too. That's crazy. But they get in these unbelievable things. So this Mr. Universe came in. I sadly can't remember his name, but it would have been around 2008. So whoever was Mr. Universe in 2008. Siri. Yes, I'm doing that. I said that.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. Let's try it again. Siri. Who was Mr. Universe in 2008?
Ilya Bryzgalov played the position of goalie for the Coyotes in 2008.
Fuck you, Siri.
Thank you, Siri.
Thank you, Siri. Wow. So we're not quite yet at AR. Let's just say that. Anyways, so instead of human, Mark is going to look up who was Mr. Universe in 2008. Could have been 2007 as well, but I suspect that guy was going to have a few-year run. But so he came in, he was posing. And the guys, the photographers and kind of the experts in the Mr. Universe bodybuilding field, down the middle of the back, I'm going to do an illustration for anybody. Those of you on the podcast, trust that it's terrible.
It was Dexter Jackson, second place Jay Cutler, third Phil Heath.
Yeah, Dexter Jackson. That's who it was. So this is the worst picture, Mark. Can you see it? No.
Yeah. We can see it.
So here's his lats. Here's the upper muscles. There's the spine. On the muscles on the parallel with the spine, just those two tubes of muscles, there were striations in that. And the people there were like, in the 30 years we've worked in this field, a human being has never achieved that. And it was just in the tube. So here's your spine, and there are two, I know what they're called, but and the striations in that, they're like in the history of humankind, that's never existed. And while I'm looking at that, that's when you're like, okay, I fucking get this now, right? Because normally it's just like just massive things. It's pretty neat, but it's so amplified and so based in chemistry as much as it is in training. But it was wild to sit there and look at that. And that's when you realize the brilliance of these guys. It's like, fuck, never in the history of any of our ancestors has anybody ever been developed in that way. That's pretty fucking cool. But so anyways, those guys cut, and there are drugs that they take to add that, to enhance that, to amplify that. And so that's possible that was in TJ's system. Now, this is not just excuses. It's also possible that guy didn't take fucking anything at all. Very possible. Very possible. Because the nature, and to Chad's question, the nature of USADA is like, what are we doing here? Like, that's the big question. What are we doing here? And who said that we should do it this way? And who the fuck are you guys? Because, and let's see if we can agree on this, because I'm going to throw out a few ideas. I'm going to offer you this. Chael Sonnen, I love you. I offer you this. The point is to protect the athletes? Is that what we're doing here? Or is the point to make the playing field even? Is that what we're doing here? Like, what are we doing here? I don't know the answer to that, and it isn't as simple. And this is a good rule of thumb that I find. If you think an argument, any kind of argument, is really simple, then you're not thinking. Any meaningful argument is not simple. And if you ever say, this is just an opinion and an idea that maybe you might want, you might not, feel free to disregard. But if you ever say, end of story, or, and that's it, or that's all there is to it, you're wrong. Because what you're really doing is saying, I feel so strongly about something, and there is nothing else should be said. Your opinion is just the opinion of one human, as is mine, as is anybody's. Most of the time, bear in mind, our opinions have been shaped for us by our parents, or if they took us to a church or a school or a group or a club. Our opinions are not our opinions. We didn't sit in the world and gather all the information and then decide what we felt based on our experience was best. We were formed. We were, what's the word you do with an animal? You take a wild animal and you domesticate it. We were domesticated, right? We were a child. Somebody assigned, and Jim Carrey went off in left field with this for about a year. But we were assigned a religion. We were assigned, my parents had fairly, they were somewhat liberal but conservative in other ways. And That seemed logical. You know, I eat medium rare. How do you eat your steak, Mark?
Medium rare.
Medium rare, me too.
Yeah.
How'd your dad eat a steak?
About the same.
Yeah, me too. What are the chances, right? What are the fucking chances? Now, you ask me, I'll try lots of other steaks. Medium rare is how I like it. If it's a little more rare, I'll dig that too. And that seems right to me because logically speaking, if I'm going to eat meat, I want to know what it tastes like. But if your dad ate fucking well-done steak, there's a pretty good chance you eat it too. And of course, there are many exceptions to this, but steak was a perfect example. We could do it with hundreds of things. So you're going to fight about something that in a lot of cases isn't even really your opinion. It's been assigned for you. And if you watch news or anything like that, all the more you are being programmed. I don't care if it's CNBC or Fox or anything in between. I don't care if you read only one website. And Daily Beast or fucking Colbert Report. I don't care which side it is.
And then beyond that, you become confirmation bias, so you look for that information to justify it.
And sadly, the fucking internet does it for you. All you get is that. And then you think that's real. You think that's real. So, I mean, if that's valuable to you, if that's not valuable to you right now, I'm hoping you hear it 27 other times and you never think back that some dummy who talks about fighting mentioned it or whoever mentioned it the 7 times before me or the 8 times after, but eventually you consider it. Your opinion isn't correct and neither is mine, and this isn't one. Right? But so what I was going to say was, you might say, it's the rules and that's all there is to it. Well, you haven't stopped to think who made them. And what was their purpose?
Why were they made? Yeah.
Why were they made? What was their motivations? And you know what? I take a great deal of happiness in knowing this is the conversation we're having about this. I fucking feel really good about this. Because what are we doing this for? Really? Like really, let's ask ourselves. Are we protecting the athletes? I'll tell you, let's just admit that we don't know the answer to that. Mark, do you know why we're doing USADA? Do you know why we want to test these guys?
I have my own theories.
Okay.
It's that they put in USADA right before they sold UFC, so it's pretty much essentially to make the UFC look like it's a legitimate sport, that everything is under regulation, under control, easier to sell. Okay, so I won't take the entire idea, but what I'm going to take that I think is a adding meaning to it is it was done by a corporation. Yeah, done for the sake of business.
Yeah. Now, so yes, done by a corporation. The corporation said we should do this, and they definitely did. So that's what it was done for. But we'll examine that in a second. And then let's just also look at something and say, let's just for a second say we don't know the real reason. So without knowing the reason, because we're not just going to knee jerk to whatever our dad believed or whatever our coach believed or whatever the people around us believed. We're not just going to, if we're somebody who always follows the rules, just say, well, that's the rules, because the only reason you always follow the rules is you've been taught that. I'll go a step further and say, I don't know exactly why it's there, but let's go to this. I'll make a statement, then you see if you got anyone to add to it.
Yeah.
I feel really uncomfortable when I see super juiced up, massively, hugely fucking steroided up guys smashing each other in the head. Now, before I go on, that doesn't mean I'm uncomfortable if somebody, uses something that helps them heal on the weekend. Doesn't mean that. I'm not a 0 or 1 type of guy. I'm saying maybe my argument is the reason a lot of these issues happen and the reason a lot of these weird, discomfortable, what are we doing here things happen is like, I really hate fucking super juiced Vitor against super juiced, who else was super juiced that we can... Alistair. And I fucking love Alistair Overeem. One of my very favorites for many reasons. So, and Vitor too. I love Vitor. Admire Vitor his importance in history. Fucking Very few people I like more than Wanderlei Silva. But you cannot tell me Wanderlei wasn't juiced to the gills in Pride. Right?
Yeah.
I feel a little uncomfortable when it gets to that level. So, now, a lot of the world that we live in, somebody's like, do you think I'm alone? Do you think I'm alone on that? That I'm kind of uncomfortable when I see these guys who are like so fucking amplified, smashing each other. I love the excitement, but deep down, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if we should like take these super
people with a deeper involvement in the sport, whether you've trained or you fought, those are the people that will feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
I think the more general spectators do not.
No way. You don't think they?
I think they want it more because listen, when Vitor was on that spinning wheel kick spree, that was on the score. That was on Sports, and that was everywhere.
The home run fucking records were all done during true. So all I was going to get at is if there's a group of people like me, sometimes the reaction is, well, then we can't have any steroids at all,
right?
Or no drugs. I don't think anybody with the nuance of what it is for these guys to train, for what it is for them, for what it is to the difference between training at elevation and somebody taking blood doping. I think if anybody's like a high level, medical doctor or specialist, can you maybe tell me what the difference is between blood doping, taking red blood cells and packing them into your body, or training at elevation for 6 months, which is your body making more red blood cells? I cannot do that, one. But then I can train at elevation. Right? Yeah. I mean, so now we start getting into nuance, and nuance is where the problem is. Nuance is where we're not good at that. Very modern society, 2019 to 2023, I have a fucking feeling a lot of us are getting good at nuance. And what are some of your favorite podcasts outside of MMA? Like thinking people, idea podcasts, people sharing concepts.
Joe Budden podcast is pretty good.
Yeah. And Rogan, of course, would be an idea. There's many of these. These are places of nuance. These are places where nuance and sophistication can be discussed. Why are people, there's a guy from Queer Eye who has a podcast that's as big as Joe's, and I think it's called Something Curiosity. My wife listens to it. Yeah. I don't know what his name is. I don't know the exact detail of it, but she said literally he just sits there and he gets people who have a really different job that he doesn't understand, and he just asks them about it for 3 hours, right? These are places of nuance. These are places of going, no, you can't do steroids, or fuck it, let them all do steroids. Somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. Yep. The reason we can't do it is it's too hard because we can't handle it. Right? So what do? Well, and again, TJ could have taken nothing. Could have easily taken nothing. But in a world where we're like, we're only going to pay you this much. You have this short of a career. Now we only make we've lowered the values of the belts themselves. Now there's interims of everything, and it only makes sense if you have 2 of them. And besides, small guys don't train hard, or small guys don't move the needle in air quotes, etc. And fuck. If I could drop weight, it's really hard. Maybe I'll take this thing that'll dehydrate me. In that world, and I'm not saying he did, because I have no fucking idea what it was, if anything. In that world, I think if we're like, well, wait a second, well, maybe we could allow that. Maybe that would be okay. In a world of subtlety and nuance and intelligence, we might do that. But we can't fucking handle that. The royal we that only sees hot take fucking narrative, hot take narrative, you're wrong, I'm right, yelling, arguing, fucking everything, everything is a conflict. We can't handle that. You think steroids should be outlawed, and I think anything goes, or vice versa.
And I think that's an after effect of the steroid era in baseball. Yeah. Because that's a stance that the old media has taken on steroids in baseball. It's the same reason why people like Barry Bonds and legendary baseball players that were on steroids are not in the Hall of Fame. And the common belief is that once these old media guys are now escorted out of, go on pasture, and the new era of writers come in, they will be let in.
Right. So what's happening there is, and I try to see myself as not media. Now, and fortunately, because I'm not really good at doing any of those things, and why not? Because I don't like them. I end up being really, in my good fortune, being directed over to my strengths, which is excellent, right? That's all anybody wants. Could I go and do, hey, this just broke, what do you have to say to this? Or ask these guys what they think of this guy doing that thing, or this guy said this about you on Twitter, and I'm not good at that, and Chael's good at that, and I admire him. And my friend Darren is good at that, and my friend Ariel is good at that. There's people who are good at that. I am not. Why not? I don't like it. I don't feel that way. I feel weird about it. I feel uncomfortable. So I don't identify myself as media. I identify myself as an influencer or a creator or an analyst. I will express my opinion. I don't do interviews and here's the question we need for the clip, but I will have conversations on video. But I guess those are splitting hairs too. Is Joe Rogan media? Joe is somebody I admire greatly. Is he media? I mean, he's a podcaster and a commentator. Is he media? He would say he isn't, but is he part of the world of media? Of course. So if that's the case, maybe we all are. But what I judge as media, I don't know that it's very necessarily a good thing, because all of us can have our own opinion on Barry Bonds, but many of us, that opinion's been fucking fed to us. Your opinion
by the authority figure.
Yeah.
The voice of authority.
Yeah. Whoever that is for you. On fucking BT Sport or, CBS Sports or,
Could be Skip Bayless, or Stephen A. Smith, or whoever it may be.
Could be the internet.
Whoever you treat as gospel.
That's right. And that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's like your opinion, if you really think about it, and this is not scary. This is empowering. It might not really be your opinion. Maybe it has become now, but at the root of who you are, who you were meant to be, and authentically what you are. And we're not talking about steroids anymore. We're not talking about TJ Dillashaw anymore. We're talking about life. This is your fucking life. You don't have to hate that person because you watch Fox News. I'm not picking on Fox News. And you don't have to celebrate this guy or this idea because you watch CNN. And you don't have to only see things this way because you watch anybody. You've been assigned a religion. Question it. Question it. You might question it, come back and go, yep, that's the one. You've been assigned a fucking a way to cook your steak. My dad, how do you take your eggs?
Scrambled.
How did your dad take your eggs?
Scrambled. There we go.
I was actually ready for this one and not actually. I was ready for this one where my mom takes a scrambled. Fine. But fuck, I have easy over eggs. I remember as a kid, my dad saying, I don't like them sunny side because of that congealed.
I just realized, because you like my work, that when we were in Chicago, I was eating sunny side.
Yeah.
I was copying it.
Yeah, you were copying me.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Why not?
Try it out.
Yeah.
It was good, right?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. See? It's like the things you're defending to the death are not yours. They're somebody else's, for fuck's sake. So should TJ Dillashaw step down? Should he vacate the belt? Should steroids, is USADA killing everything? You know what the answer to this is? It's fucking complicated. The answer to everything is it's fucking complicated. And the issue is we have spent a long fucking time, the first few generations of radio and TV, especially sports and news, taught us, make it simple, make a decision, and defend it. You fucking learned it on the radio, and if you're old, and you learned it on TV if you're middle-aged, and you're learning it on Twitter if you're a little younger and still middle-aged. That's where you learned it. You're not fighting about your beliefs. You're fighting about some beliefs you've been assigned. I don't know if fucking USADA is actually to Chad's point. In general, is a gross impediment to the sport, while fighters are significantly impaired in their recovery for injuries and training. That is true. To which people would say, is that important or is it worth it? Because if we impede their training and we there's an impediment to the sport, but we save lives or we do something for the greater good, sometimes you got to do that. But you know what? You know whether or not that's true? I don't know. And fuck, neither do you. And you don't know what you think of that. You think you know what you think of that, but you've been assigned that fucking belief system. And I'm uncomfortable when I see Vanderlei Silva or Shogun stomping someone's head in the fucking...
Well, I was just about to say, more importantly, it's his thing, he's saying sport. That's one company, one organization.
Yeah, right.
USADA is not in the sport. USADA is with UFC.
Good point. Even
you want to see people juice to the gills.
Yeah.
Go watch Ryzen.
That's right. That's a good point. Impediment to the sport. That's a belief system you've been assigned to. You just watch one particular aspect of it, and you're told that's the sport. Not maybe in so many words, but in the presentation, it's been packaged up. You're right. You're right. And then the earlier aspect. Why is USADA here? Well, this was done by a corporation. Now, this is where it gets tricky because it's very easy. It's done every day. You consume this every day. You do it. I do it. Everything you read is, not everything, large percentage of everything you read is just extrapolations based on the first bit that comes to a not fully informed mind of somebody presenting something to you, done by a corporation. Now, if I say because, I am literally making shit up because I'm missing 99.9% of the information and I'm just going with what feels right with almost no info.
Right.
But it sounds like, and the evidence says the UFC said, let's do this and hired them to do that. Why would they do it? We're just going to, in no particular order, and with the fully mention that we have zero fully informed expertise in this area, we'll just throw out some reasons that might do that. One, financial.
Right.
You mentioned they were selling a company. We need some stability. Two, defense against lawsuits. Right? If one day in the future, the NFL is dealing with lawsuits about brain injury and about so forth, about CTE, if that's ever going to be in the future for fighting, I hope it isn't. If it ever is, well, shit. Did you guys really do everything you could to protect our brains?
Exactly. Did you do your due diligence?
Well, if that's the case, and this isn't because corporations are malevolent. They are neither evil nor, happy and friendly and for the good. They are what they are. Corporations move the way that they moved based on all of the things affecting them. Laws, people, money, consumption, etc. But corporations will do what's good for them. They will not, and sometimes they'll do what's good for a fighter if those two things match. And in the case of, they were like, well, we think this is good for the fight. We're doing it for any of those reasons we mentioned, and probably many that we didn't mention and don't know.
There's actually one more that I was going to say. It's key, key decision, public image.
Public image.
Right? You don't want to go through what Vince McMahon went through during their steroid thing. With,
all of which would go public image, selling the company, and possible lawsuit in the future, all would go to the same thing. Commerce. And this again is not picking on the UFC or Apple or cups or anything else. Most things in Western society are driven by commerce. And once you understand that, you don't have to accept it or be okay with it, but at least you can work with it. It's like, this is a truth I cannot change. Most things in our culture, if they're corporation based, are driven by commerce. Okay. That's a truth I'm never going to be able to change. Could it change one day? Could I play an influence in changing it? Maybe. But will it be changing in the next while? No. Do you have the ability to change it? Absolutely not. So you know what we're not going to do? Complain on Twitter and waste our time. Opportunity cost. Every fucking minute spent complaining on Twitter is a minute you're wasting being a father or anything, whatever it is you do. So we're not going to do that because it's waste. It's inaction. It's disguise, tricking you into thinking it's action. So we will work within that. Okay, I live in a world where this is so. Well, maybe I want to work for a different company, or maybe I will work for this company in this way, or maybe I will get a second business and phase my way out of this fight. Whatever it is, you just work with that truth. But TJ Dillashaw is the first word I'll use here will sound like, improper in this case. He's a victim of the truth of the circumstances of the world that we live in. We're all victim, and victim is probably the wrong word. Not only because if he broke a rule, he's not a victim. But we don't have, none of us want to be victims.
We're casualties.
Yeah, and even casualty, victim, casualty, any of those things, not the way we want to view ourselves. We're a part of the realities of the system that we all built. Byproduct. Yeah. We are an ingredient in the soup that we cooked up in the kitchen. And yes, everything is that complicated. And that is not intimidating. It doesn't have to be. Because once you start to see it, you find curiosity in it. And if you acceptance was something we talked about in the Jorge fight. Or when Darren Till is trying to, deal with what's there. Awareness actually was the one we were talking about, but acceptance is a step of awareness. If you see something is there and that is the truth. That thing's the truth. You can fight it. I think corporations shouldn't fucking be driven by commerce. You are aware that they are. So acceptance is a natural thing. When you resist that, well, you're going to have some type of turbulence or conflict. That conflict could drive you to change. Maybe you want to be the president of the United States. That conflict could be key to driving that. But if instead all it's going to do is make you mad, release that. Useless, waste of time. But TJ is a part of this reality. I got a Instagram page, and a truth of the reality is if I use something that I think is normal, that I think is fair use, and it isn't, and I get a complaint, I might get that thing suspended. I'll be mad, but I'll release it because that's a truth of this system that I work in. I can leave the system. TJ can say, fuck it, I don't fight anymore. Or I'm not fighting for the UFC, or I'm only kickboxing, or many options. But if he's going to stay there, which I think he is, he's going to say, regardless of how it went, either I took nothing, I got dinged, we'll figure it out, and I'll take my year and I'll improve, and this will be just a short chapter in my story. Or I took something that I know logically many of my compatriots take. I took it out of a need to accomplish something that was put on me because of the world that I lived in, that I chose to do. And this happened. However, when I assess it, this is too complicated a subject for the world, for 80% of our consumers to accept. So I may have to choose to tell a lie about tainted supplements or whatever. And that's not him I'm talking about. That's every single person that's ever used that tainted supplement thing. 1 or 2 of them actually took tainted supplements, or 5, but they fucking all didn't. It's just there. And I got a friend named Mike Richmond. Mike Richmond, I commentated his fight in BKB. Mike was dinged for juice when he fought for Bellator. And he came out and he said, I took steroids. I shouldn't have taken it. But if I'm going to preserve any of what's left of who I am, I'm going to admit it and take the consequences. I fucking admire Mike Richmond so much. I don't know the exact quote, but it's admirable. It's admirable. The first person who does it and then talks about it, and and you can, and again, TJ may have taken nothing. And he may choose tainted supplement or some other route. But if he took something, this is a real choice. This is what I did. This is why I did it. This is the world that we live in. This is a complicated topic. This isn't a yes or a no thing. This isn't a 2-sentence thing. This is a many Joe Rogan podcast conversation. This is a many other thing. But also, that's going to be such a big part of your story. Maybe you don't want to be the one to do it. And I wouldn't blame him because now that's going to be part of your story. And what you're writing your fucking story. Everybody's writing their story. Mike Richmond, Bellator. I'm just gonna see it. If you're interested, you can get his quote. So there's a article in MMA Junkie from back there, and it by Ben Fawkes, great writer. And it's called "The Fighter Who Got Caught Doping and Immediately Admitted, quote, I am a cheat." So, and then Ben's talking to him. I just felt like once it came out, I wanted to tell people right away. Richmond told Ben. It felt like the right thing to do. I thought that with the little integrity I had left, I had to own up to it. I didn't want to hide behind excuses or blame it on supplements. He took to his Facebook page the same day with an announcement and drew immediate attention, mostly because of its uncommon honesty. He did it, Richmond wrote. He took steroids and he got caught. He offered no excuses or explanations in his defense, only shame and regret. I will not sit here and deny, this is so fucking admirable, man. I will not sit here and deny that I took it or act like I didn't know what I was taking or blame it on someone else, Richmond wrote. It was 2015. I am a cheat, plain and simple, and there's no excuse or reason that is valid enough to dispute the reasons why I cheated the sport and myself by using it. Richmond's admission did nothing to mitigate the consequences, by the way. He didn't do this to fucking get treated easy. He did it to be honest. But to some degree, Chael did something very similar. While we're all being Chael's fucking biggest fans, which we are. There's something. There's some other quotes in there, but listen, that wasn't an easy thing to do. But to be honest, as much as that was further back where we were all more outraged, it was easier in the sense that everything isn't amplified 100,000 times. And I'll be honest with you, my barely informed view of the world, and I say that because the more you learn, the more you realize how little we understand about everything, is it feels like as a culture, we have been taught to be dumber, to be more knee-jerk, to have only one side, to fight about everything, to stick to only our thoughts and not change anything, to defend it to the end, to add extra layers of lies and manipulate our own lies. And it's just where we are. We're in a worse place than we were in 2015 when Mike said that. So, and we're dumber. We're dumber. Mm-hmm. We react more. We think only, we've been fucking trained. We've been trained. Doesn't mean it's trapped. It's not a conspiracy theory. If your reaction to me saying you've been trained by television, you've been trained by your parents, you've been trained by the church, you've been trained by the clubs, you've been trained by the people around you to have certain opinions, if your reaction to that is anger, then they did a great job on you. That's deep, eh, Mark?
Yeah.
Fuck. They did a fucking great job on you. And I'm not being Eddie Bravo up in these places. You know I love you, Eddie Bravo. It's just true. This is true, right? So now if TJ said that, I mean, I posted a thing today about a guy coming back from the military, and he goes, his son is training.
Oh yeah, I was watching that. That was amazing. Cry? Dude, I was outside on the balcony.
Yeah, I fucking
trying to keep
cried.
my shit together.
Yeah, I fucking cried. It's heavy, man. And it's wonderful. But if I look down at the comments, let's say 1 in 5 is who put onions in this room.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
Ninjas cutting onions.
Yeah. Ninjas cut onions? That's pretty cool. But how could all these people have the same reaction? How could they all have the same reaction? How? How is that possible? We all heard it somewhere. Ninjas cutting onions. I'm going to use that. Where'd I get that? I'm emulating something. I was taught that. Mark just taught me that. Ninjas cutting onions. I'm going to use that. But I'm going to be one of dozens because me and everyone who says ninjas cutting onions have all been trained in a particular way to react a certain way to a certain thing, using the words that we've been taught to act, and we'll pass it on. We're fucking trained. We've been trained. We're being trained, and we're training each other. And don't panic. Because, listen, if you just think I'm nuts and none of this makes sense and you're mad, as I said, they did a great job on you. And don't be mad at me. And I'm not trying to fucking ruin your life. But if you're listening to me and you go, holy fuck, yeah, I mean, I guess I do have my meat the same way as my dad, which is nothing wrong with it. I still fucking love the meat that way. And I do have eggs the same way I've always had them. And I do have this opinion. And I do think I do have the exact same sentence as Joe Rogan. I've heard other commentators say, bro, this guy's no joke. They heard that from Joe. I see it on Twitter. Oh man, Paul Felder's no joke. You know, of course he's no joke. But that's not a martial arts commentary. That's something fucking cool that Joe Rogan said, and it's okay to repeat it. But why are you saying it? You've been trained. We all say the same things. I don't know. I know, very thankful that we have viewers from Australia and Ireland and fucking Europe and everywhere. So most of you won't follow this a little bit. But any of our Canadian audience, you know that every fucking junior hockey player speaks exactly the same way. Mark,
Jesus Christ.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Oh my God.
Like, exactly. They have the same intonation. So you ask them a question, they go on the internet, on YouTube, and just
watch the World Juniors and have them interview Team Canada. They do the lineup interviews. They all sound like exactly.
I would go a step further and literally put in hockey player interviews. Yeah, and it just comes up. Pro Hockey Media Relations 101, 1 million views. The joke is they all talk the same. How is it possible that a 17-year-old from Mississauga and a 23-year-old from fucking Finland and some guy who grew up in Belarus all have the exact same intonation? They've been trained. We're all trained. So your opinion on TJ is not your opinion. Yes, it is. It is your opinion. But you didn't come up with it. You didn't invent it. You weren't assigned it. It isn't in your blood.
I wouldn't say it's your opinion. It's your feeling.
Yeah.
It's your feeling towards it, and you took the opinion that matches with it, and now you're marching forward.
True. Your feeling, although even your feelings, your reaction to it, is also based on what you've learned.
Yeah.
If you grew up in a place, if you grew up on the beaches outside of Rio, where as a 12-year-old, every other 12-year-old had fucking giant pecs and big arms because steroids back in the 70s and 80s and 90s were cheaper than protein powder. Yeah. You would think that, of course, I fucking take steroids. I need to be able to like attract females in a world where everybody's bigger and stronger than me. And like that. If you grew up in a place where you had to lie and cheat and steal to live and survive and find food, your opinions on these things are very different. If you grew up in a war-torn country, you'd be like, what the fuck is this guy even sitting around talking about something as ridiculous as martial arts? I saw my father killed in front of me when I was 5. You know what I mean? All these things, our feelings are shaped by our life experiences. And that's okay. Don't freak out. Don't be mad or freak out or panic. It's, holy fuck, they're trying to train us. This is the world we live in. The second you acknowledge it, it changes everything. So Joe posted, I texted Joe when I saw him post a post. He was like, this book's awesome. Loved it. It's called The 4 Agreements. I read that book. I did a podcast on it in, I think, 2016 at Fight Network. My friend Tracy Trudeau turned me on to that book. All it does is not some fucking weird, like, cult thing. All it does is examine words and ideas themselves. What are they? Well, they're agreements. We all agree if I say the word cup, an image in our mind will pop up. And the limitations of language has shaped that. The follow-up book, and I texted Joe after, I was like, dude, you got to read this one. I'm so glad you read that book. It's called The 5th Agreement. And the number of agreements that we make with ourselves about how to view the world and how to interact with other people in ways that will be less harmful, and we will have more serenity and happiness without being a fucking weirdo about it. The 5th agreement, the other ones I'll maybe talk about some other day on the podcast, but the 5th one is called be skeptical, but learn to listen. And once you get to the point, it's okay to be skeptical. It's okay to go, wait a second, who's that USADA? You don't have to, the earth isn't flat. It's not. And most of the shit that conspiracy theorists will tell you is all fucked up and messing with you. And yes, vaccines are important and they don't cause autism. Like, there's a lot of these things, and like everybody knows them. But to be a little skeptical in a safe and comfortable way to say, well, wait a second, who is USADA? What's it there for? Why was this there? What is my real feeling? Do I feel that way because somebody has taught me that? Am I just parroting what my favorite news person or entertainment person on a news channel says all the time? Am I mad at there was some guy broke a deadlifting record and said I'm a woman now, and did that, and of course that is supposed to make you think. It's not supposed to make you go, see, people are stupid. They say gender's fluid. Or, hey, that's not fair. You're not a woman. Or like any of those things. It's supposed to make you talk about it. These are supposed to be confusing and many-layered things. It's the world we live in.
It was Rene Descartes many ages ago said, question everything.
Question everything.
Simple as that.
And
don't be paranoid, but just question it.
Just question it. Just question it. And it starts with questioning your own beliefs. What you're sure about. What you're fucking certain of. If you can question that a little bit, it'll open up everything. Should TJ be fucking suspended? First of all, we'll never know how many people are using things. First of all, should they be or shouldn't they be? Who the fuck knows? Who is USADA? What's their purpose? Why are they testing for them? What is the harm? How much does steroids help? What's the right amount? What would be safe and helpful? What's none? Is having none the best thing? Why do we believe that? Is having lots? Why do you believe that? Personally, I'm still really uncomfortable when I see the fucking like inhumans just hurting each other.
That doesn't bother me. You know what it is actually? It's the after effect. What bothers me when I see that is Brock Lesnar screaming at camera with spit coming out his mouth.
Yeah,
that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
not the actual image of him finishing Frank Mir,
especially if
him
they're
afterwards.
Yeah. So Frank Mir, when he went back to fight Brock, he gained 25, 30 pounds. Yeah. Are you mad at Frank Mir for that? Anybody? Anybody? Is there anybody out there? Anyone in the world who's like, okay, look, you know, you got to fight this guy again. You're like 30 pounds. You felt how big and strong he is, and you know, I think he might have taken something. Like, fucking, are you mad at Frank Mir because he did that? Was that the only exception, or is there many? Because I'll tell you, when I was fighting, if they said you have to fight somebody in Japan who looks like, you know, fucking my friend Vanderlei when he was in Japan, who was fighting someone who looked like that, so he had to do it, but in Brazil the doctors were different. That's just the world they grew up in. So you start questioning all those things. Then did TJ take anything? Even if he did, would that have, you know, what's my thoughts on this? Very complicated. If you can defend your ideas or your beliefs in a tweet or two, it's fucking time to examine your beliefs. Because nothing should be defended that way. Everything is complicated. And if your reaction to that is, no, it isn't, that's fucking complicated too. Question where you got these things. Why you think them. Do I think them? What would it take to change them? What does he think? He thinks the opposite of me. Is he an idiot? If your answer to that question is always yes, then you're an idiot. Everyone who disagrees, whose parent or church or training or school or teacher or friend or jiu-jitsu coach or whatever, everybody who's taught them something that interferes with or disagrees with what you were taught, each of them aren't fucking idiots. This is the world we live in. And that's okay. Accept it. Work within it. Find curiosity in it. Man, the world opens up right away when you start to see these things, when you start to have these nuanced and deeper and more interesting conversations. Also, you can get, you know,
a better understanding.
Yeah.
You know, if you have that same conversation with any athlete that, say, has done something before, you get a lot better understanding.
For sure.
You know?
For sure you do. TJ will take a year off. You know, people will have their opinions, none of whom are important at all. You know, they may affect his business in some way. They may affect his future in some way. And in that way, they're relevant to him and his family and his life. But what somebody thinks or what they tweet, he's already been down that road. You know, after everyone's called you snake and you made a snake shirt about it, you know how to handle this.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, mostly people who will not take risks or consider all these variables who will have those opinions. So if somebody's opinion really isn't worth anything, and if you look at the people having them, and you're a TJ or you're a Conor McGregor or Khabib or any of these people who are, you know, accomplished great things, they will have gone through great challenges, and they will see that most of the people who are having opinions about them turned around at the first challenge they were faced with, and that's why they're angry and bitter about life, or they've been taught that they can't accomplish things, and there's plateaus placed in front of them because of the limitations they have, and And once you see that's the case, you forgive them, and you see and you feel bad. I wish that person could have more from their life. You know, it doesn't matter. So TJ will take a year off. Hopefully he'll use it to become a better martial artist. He'll spend time with his family. He'll learn other things. He'll develop in other ways, and then he'll come back. And whatever the process is, if he chooses, if he took nothing and he's shocked, or he took something that the world won't understand why that happens in a world like this, although I think people would now. I think people would understand that. I think it's a conversation that's ready to be had. Then he'll go down the tainted supplement or some other route to choose, because the people who choose to do that one when they actually took it are the ones that are like, I feel like I have no choice. I think the world we live in will not accept I took something, and here's why it's not a cut and dry 1-0 black and white situation. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's all I got.
At the end of the day, when it comes down to any athlete or any fighter taking PEDs, especially if you're in the UFC, if you really don't care much about legacy in terms of wanting to be the greatest of all time, wanting to remember how you remembered, if you're in it as a prize fighter, it really shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Who inducts you in the Hall of Fame? Not a group of writers.
Yeah.
One person.
Yeah. Right.
In charge of the company.
Yeah. I think beyond
care
that,
about yourself in those parts.
And this is a subject for another day. I'll think about some concepts about this for a water maybe or something. But I fear that in the world changing as much as it does, that there is no legacy.
Exactly.
I think, what's Barry Bonds' legacy? Oh yeah, that was a big guy, hit a lot of home runs. Like, is there, I'm sure there are people obsessed with baseball who want to talk about it, but if they're talking about you, that is your legacy. You're being remembered. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Michael Jordan showing up at a basketball game, they hug and they cry and they freak out, but I don't know if that very thing is going to exist, and not just him, but whoever, will George St. Pierre have that experience in 2030?
Will he still be as revered? That's the thing. The reveredness will change. Guaranteed.
Once upon a time, there was only 1 billion people on Earth. Now there's 8. Is there 8? There's more people. There's more stars. There's more famous people. There's more noteworthy things. Things come and go. Things move quickly. Our attention has changed. The meaning has changed. Things that had a meaning don't mean what they used to. That's all part of it. That's all part of change. That's all part of the complexity of the world that we live in. That's all identifying all these different processes. That's what it is to live today. And that's cool. The more you do it, the more you see it, the deeper you look, the more meaningful life gets. I think that's the ultimate end thought about it. Don't be scared to discover that a lot of your views were shaped by, people domesticating you into society. That's been part of your life. Once you discover that, you start to take back some of your own ideas and discover new things. It adds to the meaningful nature of life, to the meaning of what it is to be alive. You start to figure out who you really are, what you were what your possibilities are. You start to realize you can change things, remove limitations. This is all good. I'm sure TJ doesn't feel good right now, but it is good. It is good. It's all one big fucking river, and you can flow with it or you can swim against it hard. And, I'm really glad I got to fucking hang out today and think. I don't see any way back from this point. I don't see any way, not right yet. I don't see any likelihood to be backing up from this line of thinking for a bit. So if you hung in till the end, then you like that I just said that. You do. You wouldn't be fucking here if you didn't like this line of thinking. But I'll take, from anyone that got to this point, we'll say the words Stratford Festival Red Pen. If you got to that point, give me some feedback, thoughts, ideas. If you're listening on podcast, if you're listening on YouTube, for anybody that got to the Stratford Festival Red Pen at the end, I want to know what you're thinking, where to go, what other ideas, what you read, what you got out of this, because we're going to go further here. And when we go down to Rochester, we're going to have a good few podcasts between now and then. And then when we go down to Rochester, we're going to we're going to explore these life things with these fighters and these coaches and with the people around, the fights down there, because I just can't. I'm too curious. It's too interesting, We're learning too much by fucking swimming out into some uncharted waters, and it's worth it. That's it for this week. Follow me on Instagram at RobinBlackMMA. I'm going to put up lots of 1-minute breakdowns. If you want a t-shirt, it's shopify.com. And if you are listening on the podcast, I want feedback anywhere. Follow me on Twitter and then say, hey, follow me back. I listen to your podcast, and I will follow you back, and then you can DM me any points and thoughts, and any feedback, anything we could do better. And we will be back next week. I don't know what the fuck we'll talk about, but I really want to,
Lightweights.
Yeah, yes. We'll be talking about these lightweights and their journeys and their lives and the way that, their martial artistry match up. And Gastelum and Israel Adesanya, young and new, what it is to be, maybe there's even a water in there. What it is, they are playing a different game. They are experiencing combat different than Matt Hughes and George St. Pierre did then. They are. So what is that? That'll give me something to explore.
Way more calculations.
Yeah. The brain is more advanced. Their brain is more advanced. Maybe we'll find an analogy to prehistoric man and the movement through, Homo sapien all the way up. Maybe there's something there as far as how their brains are learning to work and interfacing with combat itself. But until then, enjoy the hostilities, my friends.